The conference room floated in space, a massive glass sphere where representatives from 100 different worlds gathered. Hyunwoo stood at the human podium, his hands gripping the edges as he looked out at the sea of alien faces. Some had multiple eyes, others had tentacles instead of arms, and a few didn't even have solid bodies. But all of them were watching him with the same expression: boredom. The Vrath forces have now occupied 17% of Sanctuary 4's agricultural zones, Hyunwoo said, keeping his voice calm and steady. This is a direct violation of the territorial agreement signed in 2251. We request the Council's intervention. A deep, rumbling laugh echoed through the chamber. It came from the Vrath ambassador, a massive creature that looked like a cross between a bear and a lizard, covered in thick armored scales. His name was something humans couldn't pronounce, so they just called him the Vrath Speaker. The human complains again. The Vrath Speaker growled. Your kind has sat on that farming world for 30 years doing nothing with it. We need the resources. We take them. This is the way of strong species. Hyunwoo took a deep breath. He had given the same speech 12 times in the past 6 months. Strength is not measured only by military force. The agreements we all signed, agreements are for the weak, another voice interrupted. This one belonged to a Kelsor representative, a floating jellyfish-like creature that spoke through vibrations. Your species has never fought for anything. You talk about peace and cooperation, but we all know the truth. Humans are afraid of conflict. Several other ambassadors made sounds of agreement. Hyunwoo felt his jaw tighten, but he maintained his composure. This was always how it went. Humanity had joined the Galactic Council 103 years ago, and from the very beginning other species had seen them as weak. The meeting ended with no resolution, as Hyunwoo knew it would. He walked through the corridors of the council station, his shoes clicking on the metal floor. Jiwoo was waiting for him at the docking bay, leaning against the entrance to their ship, the Eternal Harmony. Let me guess, Jiwoo said. They laughed at you again. They always do, Hyunwoo replied tiredly. He looked at his friend and colleague. Jiwoo had been a captain of diplomatic vessels for 20 years. Her face showed the same frustration Hyunwoo felt. They boarded the ship and set course back to Earth. In the captain's quarters, Taiyang was waiting with reports. He was the chief science officer, a quiet man who preferred data to politics. The situation on Sanctuary 4 is getting worse, Taiyang said, spreading holographic images across the table. The Vrath burned another farming community yesterday. 15 families lost everything. Hyunwoo sat down heavily. And the council won't act. They never do, Jiwoo said. To them this is just natural selection. The strong take from the weak. That's how it's always been out here. But it doesn't have to be, Hyunwoo said quietly. The journey back to Earth took 3 days. When they arrived, Hyunwoo went directly to meet with Minji, the head of Human Colonial Affairs. Her office overlooked the rebuilt city of Seoul, where towers of glass and green plants reached toward the sky. Earth had come so far from the dark days of the early 21st century. The Council refuses to help, Hyunwoo reported. They say territorial disputes are natural and we should handle it ourselves or abandon the colony. Minji stood at the window, her reflection showing the worry on her face. Sanctuary 4 has 2 million people, families, children. We can't just abandon them. The Vrath know that, Hyunwoo said. They're counting on our unwillingness to fight. Minji turned to face him. You know our history, Hyunwoo. You know what humans are capable of when we fight. That's exactly why we don't fight anymore. We promised ourselves after the last war that we would never return to those days. Hyunwoo nodded. He had studied history extensively. The 20th and 21st centuries had been brutal times for humanity. Wars that killed millions, weapons that could destroy entire cities in seconds, conflicts that nearly ended human civilization itself. When humanity finally achieved true peace in 2089, it had been a collective decision never to return to the horrors of the past. But what if that promise costs us everything? Hyunwoo asked. Minji didn't answer. She didn't have an answer. Over the next 3 months, the situation deteriorated. The Vrath didn't just take territory. They seemed to enjoy making humans suffer. They destroyed farms slowly, methodically, making sure people watched their life's work burn. They cut off supply routes, causing food shortages. They broadcast messages calling humans soft and pathetic. The Galactic Council did nothing. Some species actually found it entertaining. Yunwoo returned to Sanctuary 4 to see the situation firsthand. He met with Daewon, the colony's governor, a man in his 60s who had helped build the colony from nothing. "My people are scared," Daewon said. They stood on a hill overlooking a valley where fields should have been green with crops. Instead, black scorch marks covered the land. "They ask me what Earth is going to do. I tell them to be patient, that diplomacy takes time. But how much more time do we have?" Hyunwoo looked at the devastation and felt something he hadn't felt in years. Anger. Not the hot, explosive kind, but cold and deep. "I don't know," he admitted. That night, Hyunwoo couldn't sleep. He walked through the colony's small town center, where families had lived peaceful lives until recently. He saw a school with broken windows and remembered what Minji had said about children. He made a call to Earth. It was time to escalate through proper channels. If the Council wouldn't protect humans, then humanity needed to make a stronger case. But even as he made his reports and filed his complaints, Hyunwoo felt a growing certainty in his gut. The Wrath weren't going to stop. The Council wasn't going to help. And eventually, someone was going to have to make a very difficult choice. Humanity had spent almost 200 years building a reputation as peacemakers. They had 7 colonies, all focused on sustainable living and scientific research, rather than military expansion. They had the smallest defense force in the Council, barely enough to patrol their own space. Other species saw this as proof of human weakness. None of them had bothered to ask why such a weak species had survived long enough to reach the stars. None of them had studied human history deeply enough to understand what humans had survived to get here. None of them realized that patience and pacifism were choices, not limitations. The Wrath were about to teach them the difference. They just didn't know it yet. The morning sun rose over Sanctuary 4, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Hai-Wan stood at the window of her small classroom, watching her students arrive. They were young, between 6 and 10 years old, children of farmers and scientists who had made this distant world their home. She was Daewon's daughter and had been teaching on Sanctuary 4 for 8 years. She loved her job, loved seeing the wonder in children's eyes when they learned something new, but lately it had been hard to focus on lessons when everyone could see the smoke from burning farms on the horizon. Teacher Hai-Wan, a small boy named Minho, asked, raising his hand. "Why are the Wrath being mean to us?" Hai-Wan knelt down to his level. "Sometimes people do bad things because they think being strong means taking what they want. But really, being strong means protecting others and being kind." She hoped she was right. She hoped kindness would win in the end. High above the planet, Captain Sang-woo stood on the bridge of the Last Warning, a human defense ship. It wasn't a particularly impressive vessel compared to the massive warships other species used. It was designed for rescue operations, medical support, and basic patrol duties. Sang-woo had been ordered to observe the Wrath activity but not to engage. "Captain, another Wrath squadron just entered the atmosphere," his second officer reported. "They're heading toward Sector 7. "That's where the main settlements are," Sang-woo said, his hands gripping the chair's armrests. "What are our orders?" "Observe only. Do not engage." Sang-woo closed his eyes briefly. Every instinct told him to act, but he was a soldier. He followed orders, even when those orders felt wrong. Back on Earth, in a secure facility beneath the rebuilt city of Busan, Yunha worked late into the night. She was a military historian and strategic advisor, which meant her job was to study how wars were fought and how they could be prevented. Recently, she had been given a special assignment: review all classified military records from human history. What she found disturbed her deeply. The files went back 300 years, to times when humanity fought wars that killed millions. She read about tactics and strategies that made her stomach turn, weapons so terrible that their very existence had forced humanity to find another way. She read about the last war of 2089, the conflict that finally convinced humanity to stop fighting itself. But as she read, Yunha realized something. Humanity hadn't stopped fighting because they couldn't fight anymore. They had stopped because they chose to. There was a difference, a very important difference. She composed a message and sent it to the Galactic Council. It was short, just 2 sentences. But Yunha hoped it would make them think. On Sanctuary 4, things got worse. The Wrath commander, a brutal warrior named something that translated roughly to Bone Crusher, issued an ultimatum. His message was broadcast across every communication device on the planet. Humans of Sanctuary 4, his voice rumbled. You have 48 hours to evacuate this planet completely. Leave everything behind. If you are still here when the time ends, we will begin cleansing operations. This is your only warning. Daewon called an emergency meeting. Haewon attended along with other community leaders. The governor looked older than his years, worry lines deep on his face. Earth says they're still negotiating, Daewon told the gathered crowd. They're asking for more time. And if we don't get it? Someone shouted. Silence fell over the room. Everyone knew the answer. Haewon made a decision in that moment. She pulled out her personal recording device and spent the next day documenting everything. She recorded the scared faces of children, the burned farms, the families packing their few possessions. She recorded her father trying to comfort people while clearly terrified himself. Then, she recorded the Wrath attacks that started before the 48 hours ended. Bone Crusher apparently decided that 2 days was too generous. At the 30-hour mark, Wrath ships began orbital bombardment of civilian centers. They didn't target military installations because there barely were any. They targeted homes, schools, and hospitals. Haewon was at the school when the first strike hit 3 blocks away. The building shook and children screamed. She gathered them together, trying to shield them with her own body as debris fell around them. Through the broken windows, she could see fire and destruction spreading through the town. She kept her recording device running, even as her hands shook with fear. The bombardment lasted 1 hour. When it stopped, 300,000 people were dead. Entire communities simply ceased to exist. The town where Haewon had taught was now a crater. She survived only because she had led the children to a basement shelter. Daewon found his daughter in the ruins, covered in dust but alive. They held each other and cried. Around them, Sanctuary 4 burned. In orbit, Sang-woo watched helplessly as the tragedy unfolded below. His crew was in shock, some crying openly at their stations. They had families down there, friends, people they loved. Captain, his communications officer said, voice breaking. We have to do something. Our orders, Sang-woo started. To hell with orders, she shouted. They're killing civilians. Sang-woo wanted to agree. Every part of him screamed to fire weapons to make the Wrath pay. But he also knew his small ship against the Wrath fleet would be like a candle against a hurricane. Hold position, he ordered quietly. And pray Earth is paying attention. Earth was paying attention. Haewon had been broadcasting her recordings to every human network she could access. Billions of people on Earth and the other 6 colonies watched as Sanctuary 4 died. They saw children running from explosions. They saw hospitals burning. They saw everything. The outcry was immediate and massive. People took to the streets demanding action. Politicians who had supported the peaceful approach suddenly found themselves facing angry crowds. The carefully maintained peace that humanity had built started to crack. In the secure facility in Busan, Yunha received a call. It was from the Human Council, the governing body that made decisions for all of humanity. The historical military records you've been reviewing, the council leader said. We need you to prepare a briefing. We need to know what humanity is capable of if we remove the restrictions. Yunha felt cold. You're considering, just prepare the briefing. 24 hours after the bombardment, the Galactic Council held an emergency session. Hyunwoo stood at the human podium again, but this time he looked different. His eyes were hard, his jaw set. 300,000 civilians, he said quietly, murdered while the council did nothing. Territorial disputes, Blacker, the Wrath speaker began, are not an excuse for genocide, Hyunwoo interrupted. We came to you for help. We followed your rules. We tried diplomacy. You failed us. What will you do? The Kelsor representative asked mockingly. Will the peaceful humans finally show their teeth? Hyunwoo looked directly at the Wrath speaker. I sent you Eunha's message yesterday. Did you read it? The Wrath speaker laughed. The one about humans learning not to fight? Yes, very amusing. You misunderstood it, Hyunwoo said softly. We didn't learn how not to fight. We learned when not to fight. There's a difference. An alert sounded on Hyunwoo's communication device. He looked at it, and for just a moment something like sadness crossed his face. Then it hardened into determination. The message I just received contains 6 words from the Human Council, Hyunwoo announced to the assembly. Authorization code nightmare. Restraints are lifted. The alien representatives looked confused. They didn't understand what those words meant. They would learn soon enough. Fleet Admiral Kite had been waiting for this moment for 30 years, though he had hoped it would never come. He stood in the command center of a facility that officially didn't exist, hidden in an asteroid field far from Earth. Around him, hundreds of officers moved with sudden urgency, activating systems that had been dormant for decades. All shipyards reporting ready, an officer announced. Crews are boarding now. Kite nodded slowly. He was an older man with gray hair and a face that had seen too much. He had fought in the last war as a young soldier, had seen what humanity could do when they stopped holding back. He had spent his entire adult life praying they would never have to do it again. "Begin launch sequence," he ordered, "and may whatever gods exist forgive us." Across human space, hidden facilities activated. What the galaxy thought were simple mining operations and research stations suddenly revealed their true purpose. Massive doors opened in asteroids and ships began to emerge. Not exploration vessels, not civilian transports. These were warships, pure and simple, built over 8 decades in absolute secrecy. The Eternal Harmony had been a cover story. Humanity's real fleet was nothing like it. Sujin commanded the assault carrier Righteous Fury, a vessel 3 times the size of any ship humanity had publicly acknowledged. She had trained for this her entire military career, running simulations and drills for a war everyone hoped would never happen. Now it was real. "All squadrons report ready," her tactical officer said. "We have 400 ships in formation. Set course for Sanctuary 4, Sujin ordered. Maximum speed." The human fleet moved through space faster than should have been possible. They had been testing experimental faster-than-light drives for years, technology they kept hidden from the Galactic Council. Within 36 hours, they arrived at Sanctuary 4. The Wrath fleet was waiting, 800 ships strong. When they detected the human vessels approaching, Bone Crusher broadcast a message that was equal parts mockery and threat. "So the humans finally bring their toys to play," he growled. "You are outnumbered 2 to 1. Surrender now and we will let you evacuate your pitiful colony." Kite, commanding from the flagship Resolute Dawn, responded personally. His voice was calm, almost sad. "This is your only chance to withdraw. Leave now and we will let you go. Stay, and we will show you what humanity has been hiding." The Wrath fleet erupted in laughter across all communication channels. They had studied human capabilities for years. They knew humans had small ships, limited weapons, and no real combat experience. This would be an easy victory. They were wrong about everything. The battle began when the Wrath opened fire. Their massive plasma cannons, weapons that could melt through standard ship armor in seconds, launched volley after volley at the human fleet. But something was wrong. The human ships moved differently than expected, working together in patterns the Wrath had never seen. They didn't fight like individuals. They fought like a single organism. Then the humans fired back. Yuna, an AI warfare specialist, sat in a dark room filled with screens, her fingers dancing across holographic keyboards. She had been born after the last war, but she had studied every conflict in human history. She knew tactics and strategies that the peaceful galaxy had forgotten existed. "Deploying swarm drones," she announced calmly, "initiating cyber infiltration protocol." Thousands of small drones, too tiny for Wrath sensors to track individually, spread through space. They attached to Wrath ships burrowing through weak points in the armor. Once inside, they didn't explode. They did something worse. They hacked into ship systems. Suddenly, Wrath ships found their weapons targeting their own allies. Their communication systems broadcast screams and panic instead of orders. Their navigation went haywire, causing collisions between their own vessels. "What is happening?" Bone Crusher roared. "How are they doing this?" His crew had no answers. They were too busy trying to stop their ship from tearing itself apart. While the Wrath fleet descended into chaos, Jae-sung and his Ghost Protocol teams were doing their part. They had infiltrated Wrath command ships weeks ago, hiding in cargo holds and maintenance shafts waiting for this exact moment. They were special operations soldiers trained in methods that most of humanity had tried to forget. Jae-sung moved through the corridors of Bone Crusher's flagship like a shadow. His team of 6 moved with him, silent and deadly. They didn't kill randomly. They were precise, surgical. They reached the bridge and planted devices that would broadcast everything happening there, across all Wrath communication channels. Bone Crusher and his command staff suddenly found themselves on display, their fear and confusion visible to every Wrath ship in the fleet. The psychological impact was devastating. Seeing their mighty commander in panic broke the Vrath morale instantly. Su-Jin watched from the righteous fury as the Vrath fleet began to collapse. It had been less than 2 hours since the battle started. 800 ships, and they were falling apart without the humans having to destroy most of them directly. Admiral Kite, she reported. The Vrath formation is breaking. They're trying to scatter. Don't let them, Kite responded. His voice carried no satisfaction, only grim determination. Track every ship. Follow them wherever they go. This ends today. The human fleet split into hunting groups. They didn't just defeat the Vrath. They hunted them systematically. Each ship that tried to flee was tracked across light years. Each attempt to hide was foiled by human sensors that seemed to see everything. Each desperate attempt to fight back was met with overwhelming, coordinated firepower. What had been a fleet of 800 became 600, then 400, then 200. The Vrath fought bravely in their own way, but bravery meant nothing against humanity's cold, calculated warfare. Bonecrusher made his last stand with 50 ships, rallying them for one final charge against the human flagship. It was a desperate move born of rage and humiliation. Su-Jin intercepted them with her battle group. For Sanctuary 4, she whispered, and gave the order to fire. The righteous fury and her escorts demonstrated what human weapons could really do. Not the limited civilian-grade equipment they had shown the galaxy, but true military-grade armaments. Weapons designed not just to destroy ships, but to obliterate them so completely that nothing remained but atoms. In 4 seconds, Bonecrusher and his remaining fleet ceased to exist. 4 hours after the battle began, it was over. The Vrath Dominion fleet, which had terrorized multiple species for centuries, no longer existed. Not a single ship escaped. Not a single warrior survived, but the human fleet didn't stop. Kite had his orders and he would see them through. Set course for Vrath territory, he commanded. Begin Operation Reckoning. Across the galaxy, other species monitored the battle's aftermath in stunned silence. They had all assumed humans were weak. They had watched humanity take abuse for over a century without fighting back. They had believed the lie that humans couldn't fight. Now they watched as the human fleet moved toward the Vrath homeworld, and they began to understand a terrible truth. Humans could fight. Humans had always been able to fight. They had simply chosen not to. The Vrath had made them change that choice, and the galaxy was about to learn what happened when you made humanity angry. In the ruins of Sanctuary 4, Haewon and the other survivors watched the broadcasts of the battle. They saw the Vrath fleet destroyed. They saw justice swift and terrible. She thought about the 300,000 who had died, about the children she had tried to protect. Is it wrong? She asked her father quietly. That I feel glad? Daewon looked at the sky where human ships now patrolled protectively. No, he said finally. It's not wrong. It's human. The Galactic Council chamber erupted in chaos. Representatives from dozens of species shouted, argued, and demanded explanations. At the human podium, Hyunwoo stood silently, his face expressionless, waiting for them to quiet down. This is an outrage. The Kelsor representative vibrated. The humans have destroyed an entire fleet. This aggression cannot stand. Aggression? Hyunwoo's voice cut through the noise like a knife. The Vrath killed 300,000 civilians. We responded. You call that aggression? You should have stopped after defeating their fleet, another ambassador argued. But your ships are now moving toward Vrath territory. You're planning an invasion. Hyunwoo looked at each representative in turn. For 103 years, humanity has followed every rule. We respected boundaries. We sought diplomatic solutions. We trusted this council to enforce the agreements we all signed. He paused. The Vrath broke those agreements. They committed genocide. And you did nothing. Territorial disputes are natural selection, Hyunwoo finished. Yes, you've said that many times, we agree. What's happening now is natural selection. The Vrath were selected for extinction. The bluntness of his words shocked the assembly into silence. Jiwoo no longer commanded a diplomatic vessel. The Eternal Harmony had been reassigned to medical support, helping evacuate wounded from Sanctuary 4. Jiwoo now stood on the bridge of the battle carrier Iron Justice, commanding a battle group of 40 ships. Their target was Vrath Colony 7, a mining world with 3 million Vrath citizens and significant military presence. Jiwoo had studied the colony's layout for weeks even before the war started. Humanity had been gathering intelligence on every potential enemy for decades. Broadcast on all Vrath frequencies, Ji-Woo ordered. A communication officer nodded, and Ji-Woo began speaking. Her words were translated into the Vrath language, harsh and direct. People of Vrath Colony 7, this is Captain Ji-Woo of the Human Defense Fleet. Your military leaders killed our civilians. You have 48 hours to evacuate all non-military personnel from this colony. After that time, we will dismantle all military and industrial infrastructure. This is your only warning. She gave them the same deadline the Vrath had given Sanctuary 4. The symbolism was intentional. On Earth, Minji coordinated what humanity called the reclamation effort. Her office had become a war room, filled with screens showing 47 Vrath colonies, dozens of military installations, and countless strategic targets. Every single one had been mapped, analyzed, and prepared for potential action. The Council is demanding we stop, an aide informed her. Tell them we'll stop when the Vrath no longer pose a threat, Minji replied without looking up from her work. Until then, we're simply enforcing the peace they refuse to enforce. Da-Un was a combat psychologist, someone who studied the mental effects of warfare on soldiers and civilians. She had been assigned to document what was happening to humanity during this conflict. Her findings troubled her deeply. She interviewed soldiers, pilots, and commanders. What she found wasn't bloodlust or savage joy in violence. Instead, she found sadness, determination, and something like resignation. Humans weren't becoming monsters. They were simply doing what they felt had to be done. How do you feel about what we're doing? She asked Sang-Woo, who had been promoted to lead a tactical squadron after the Battle of Sanctuary 4. Sang-Woo was quiet for a long moment. I feel like we've failed, he finally said. We spent 2 centuries building a better version of humanity. A peaceful version. And in 4 hours we threw it all away. Did we throw it away? Da-Un asked. Or did we prove we can control it? I don't know, Sang-Woo admitted. Ask me again when this is over. The 48 hours passed. True to her word, Ji-Woo waited. Human ships helped evacuate Vrath civilians who wanted to leave, providing transport to the Vrath homeworld. Not all Vrath accepted the offer. Many stayed either out of pride or genuine courage. When the deadline expired, the human fleet acted with devastating precision. They didn't bombard the planet from orbit. They didn't kill indiscriminately. Instead, they demonstrated a level of surgical military precision that terrified observers. Factories were destroyed by targeted strikes that left nearby homes untouched. Military bases were dismantled piece by piece. Communications arrays were disabled, not destroyed, so civilians could still call for help if needed. It was destruction with mercy, violence with rules, and it was somehow more frightening than simple brutality. Across 47 Vrath colonies, the same pattern repeated. Human fleets arrived, gave warnings, evacuated civilians, then systematically removed all military and industrial capability. The Vrath military tried to fight back, but it was useless. Every tactic they tried, humans had a counter for. Every weapon they used, humans had a better one. Some Vrath colonies surrendered immediately. Others fought to the last. But the result was always the same. The other aggressive species in the galaxy watched this unfold with growing horror. The Kelser hives had been planning to expand into human territory, assuming humans were easy prey. They quietly canceled those plans. The Draxon Empire had been threatening human merchant ships. They issued formal apologies and paid reparations. 12 different species that had military alliances tried to form a coalition against humanity. They held secret meetings, planned joint operations, and prepared for a united front. Then they received a message from Ji-Woo's fleet. It was simple, a list of coordinates, military bases, supply depots, command centers, classified installations that these species thought were hidden. The message came with a single line of text. We've always been watching. Don't make us act. The coalition dissolved within hours. In the Galactic Council, Hyunwoo addressed the assembly again. 3 weeks had passed since the Vrath had attacked Sanctuary 4. The Vrath Dominion, which had controlled over 50 worlds and had been a major military power, now controlled only their homeworld. Their fleet was gone. Their military was disbanded. Their colonies were either independent or under human peacekeeping supervision. You said territorial disputes were natural selection, Hyunwoo reminded them. We agreed. We selected. The Wrath started this conflict. We finished it. This is tyranny. Someone shouted, "No," Hyunwoo said calmly. Tyranny is killing civilians and facing no consequences. Tyranny is having rules that only apply to some species. What we're doing is justice. Delayed, but justice nonetheless. A senior Galactic Council member, an ancient being from a species known for wisdom, spoke up. "What do you want, humans? You've made your point. You've proven your strength. What comes next?" Hyunwoo smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "What comes next is change. The Council failed. The system failed, so we're going to fix it. Not by conquering you, but by making sure this never happens again. And if we refuse to change, then you'll learn what happened to the Wrath," Hyunwoo said quietly. "We don't want to rule you. We don't want to conquer the galaxy. We just want peace. Real peace, enforced peace, not the pretend peace where the strong prey on the weak. You can have that peace voluntarily or we can enforce it. Your choice." The chamber fell silent. Every representative understood the implicit threat. Humanity had revealed strength beyond anyone's imagination. They had fought a war with rules and mercy, but they had still won absolutely. On Sanctuary 4, reconstruction had begun. HFY taught classes again, though in temporary buildings while permanent structures were being rebuilt. Her students included not just human children now, but some young Wrath whose parents had accepted human protection. "Teacher HFY," Minho asked one day, "are humans scary now?" HFY thought about the question carefully. "We're the same as we always were," she finally answered. "We prefer kindness, but we'll use strength when we must." "Does that make us scary?" "A little," Minho admitted. "But also safe?" HFY smiled. "Yes, safe, that's what we want to be." 6 months after what the galaxy now called the 3-week war, the universe looked very different. Taeyang stood before the reformed Galactic Council, presenting the new Charter of Universal Rights. He was no longer just a science officer. He now led the Galactic Reform Commission, a position that gave him authority to reshape how the entire galaxy governed itself. Article 1. Taeyang read calmly. "All species have the right to exist without fear of unprovoked aggression. Territorial disputes must be resolved through mediation before any military action is considered." Article 2. Targeting civilian populations is a war crime punishable by immediate intervention. Article 3. This council exists to prevent conflict, not to profit from it. The assembled representatives listened quietly. There was no mockery now, no dismissive laughter. Every species that had voted on these reforms had voted yes. Not because they wanted to, but because they understood the alternative. Human warships remained visible throughout the galaxy, a constant reminder of what happened when the rules were broken. HFY had changed since Sanctuary 4 burned. She still taught children, but now she also served as ambassador for human-alien relations. Her appointment had been controversial. Many thought survivors of the attack would be too angry, too biased. But HFY had argued the opposite. "I know what war costs," she told the Human Council during her appointment hearing. "I saw children die. I saw my home destroyed. That's exactly why I should do this job. Because I never want anyone else, human or alien, to experience what I experienced." She now traveled to different worlds, speaking about peace and its price. Her scars, both visible and invisible, made her message powerful. When she spoke about forgiveness, people listened because they knew she had paid for the right to speak about it. "We will never strike first," HFY told audiences across the galaxy, "but we will always strike last. That's not a threat. It's a promise. We would rather live in peace than die in war, but we would rather die in war than live without justice." Her speeches became famous, translated into hundreds of languages, taught in schools across multiple species. Kite remained as Fleet Admiral, though many assumed he would retire after the war. When asked why he stayed, his answer was simple. "Someone needs to remember. Someone needs to carry the weight of what we did. If I retire, if I pretend it didn't happen, then I've learned nothing." The human fleet remained active, but its mission had changed. Instead of hiding, it patrolled openly. Ships visited systems that had previously been lawless, where stronger species preyed on weaker ones. Their presence alone usually prevented conflict. The few times it didn't, the response was swift and overwhelming. But Kite took no joy in it. He gave a speech at the reformed Galactic Council that would become part of the historical record, replayed in classrooms and military academies for generations. You called us weak because we chose peace, Kite said, standing at the podium where Hyunwoo had once pleaded for help. Now you call us monsters because we chose war. The truth is simpler. We are capable of both. We preferred peace. You made us choose war. That choice is now yours to make. He paused, looking at each representative. Every day, every hour, you all make a choice. You can choose cooperation, justice, and mutual protection, or you can choose aggression, oppression, and exploitation. If you choose the first path, you'll find humanity to be your strongest ally. If you choose the second, he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Throughout the galaxy, species began studying human history in earnest for the first time. University courses appeared. Human Warfare, a Historical Analysis. The Psychology of Peaceful Aggression, Case, Studies in Proportional Response. What they discovered fascinated and horrified them in equal measure. Humans had spent 10,000 years perfecting the art of killing each other. They had created weapons that could end all life on their planet multiple times over. They had fought wars that killed more people than most species' total populations. They had done terrible, unspeakable things to each other. And then they had stopped, not because they forgot how, not because they lost the ability, but because they collectively decided that there had to be a better way. The last war of 2089 had been humanity's choice to end the cycle of violence, but it had been a choice, not a surrender. The galaxy began to understand that restraint and inability were completely different things. Sang-woo did eventually retire from active military service. He spent 3 years writing a comprehensive history of the conflict, from the first Vrath encroachment to the final peace treaty. His book, Why Peace Was Always Our Choice, became required reading at the Galactic Council. The final passage of his book was quoted more than any other. Humans spent 10,000 years learning how to kill efficiently. We created weapons that could destroy worlds. We developed tactics that could win any battle. We studied warfare until we became masters of death. Then we spent 300 years learning how not to use those skills. We built peace, cultivated compassion, and chose cooperation over competition. The galaxy mistook our restraint for inability. They assumed we were weak because we were kind. They thought our patience was cowardice. They were wrong. We were never weak. We were practicing control. The Vrath made us stop practicing. The galaxy won't make that mistake again. Sanctuary 4 was rebuilt better than before. The 300,000 who died were memorialized in a garden that covered the former crater of the largest bombardment. Each plant represented a life lost. Families from across human space contributed to the garden, making it a living reminder of why the war had been necessary and why it should never happen again. Daewon continued as governor, though he aged rapidly after the conflict. He spent his remaining years ensuring that the colony became a symbol of resilience and hope, rather than vengeance and anger. On the memorial's dedication day, he gave a speech that brought tears to many eyes. We lost so many, he said quietly. Children who would have grown into scientists, artists, explorers. Adults who had so much left to give. Elders who carried wisdom we can never recover. We lost them because someone thought humanity was weak. We responded not out of hatred but out of necessity. We showed strength not because we wanted to, but because we had to. Now we have peace. Real peace. Let's honor the dead by never forgetting what peace costs. 5 years after the 3-week war, aggressive expansion in the galaxy had effectively stopped. Species still had disputes, but they came to the mediation tables. They negotiated. They compromised. Because they all knew the alternative. Hyunwoo finally retired from diplomatic service, having seen the reforms he fought for finally implemented. On his last day, a young ambassador asked him for advice. How do we maintain this peace? The young human asked. How do we make sure we never have to fight again? Hyunwoo smiled, tired but genuine. We can't ensure we'll never fight again. What we can ensure is that fighting remains a last resort, not a first choice. We must stay strong enough that no one wants to test us, but kind enough that no one needs to fear us. That's the balance. That's what being human means. The galaxy entered a new era. It wasn't perfect. Disputes still happened. Conflicts still arose. But the wild, violent expansion that had characterized galactic politics for millennia ended. Humanity didn't become the rulers of the galaxy. They didn't want that role. Instead, they became its guardians, its enforcers of the peace they had always wanted. They remained visible, remained strong, and remained ready, but they also remained hopeful. Because if humanity could transform from a species that nearly destroyed itself to one that protected others, then maybe any species could change. Maybe peace wasn't just a human dream, but a galactic possibility. The universe had learned terror when humans lost their temper. Now it was learning something else. Humans were most dangerous not when they were angry, but when they were patient, prepared, and pushed beyond their very generous limits. The message was clear to every species. Every world, every civilization, humanity wants peace. Humanity will work for peace. Humanity will sacrifice for peace. But if you take that peace away, humanity will teach you why they stopped fighting themselves. And that lesson the galaxy learned was one no one wanted to repeat.